So it gives me great pleasure to give a big East End Books P-Town welcome to Leah Singer, the author of this incredible novel, The Piano Student. So we're really thrilled to have Leah here and also to have Liz here. Leah Singer is a German cultural historian and a novelist who uses a pseudonym for her fictional works. Under her legal name of Eva Bauer, she has authored biographies of Frederick Chopin and Wolfgang Mozart. She's also written novels inspired by the lives of Wittgenstein and painter Caspar David Friedrich. And you can see additional details on our website about her other books, and all of them are available through our website. Then I'm happy also to introduce to you Liz Elisabeth Lauffer, who's a German-English literary translator based in Vermont. She received her BA in German Studies from Wesleyan University and her education, oh God, my mind is going here, her ED from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. In 2014, she won, I'll never say this, so can you say it, Liz?
The Gute Kunst.
Thank you. Prize for Emerging Translators, which marked the beginning of her career in literary translation. The Piano Student is her most recent publication, and it's her second book with New Vessel Press. And I see that the publisher, Michael Wise, has joined us from New Vessel Press. We're really excited to see you here. The book is currently on sale. The on sale date was yesterday. We have plenty of books in supply. So if you're looking to get a book signed or just get a book shipped to you, if you don't want it signed, they're available right now. We'll get them out to you promptly. So we will begin with our fantastic author and translator, and we'll do Q&A at the very end. Again, I want to thank you all for coming to Provincetown virtually with us. We're very excited to have you here at East End Books P-Town, and I'm really thrilled about this book event. This is a phenomenal book, and I really want to thank, of course, Michael for letting me know about this early on. Michael Wise, the publisher of New Vessel Press, letting me know about this and some other phenomenal books from them. And as soon as I got this copy, my advanced copy, and read it, and Michael had inquired about an event, I was like, absolutely. This is absolutely an event that I want to have for so many reasons, including my former life on the symphony board in Florida. So in any event, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Liz and Leah, and thank you for coming. And also a great appreciation to Leah for appearing at, is it almost midnight in Munich? We thank you so much for being with us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeff, and East End Books P-Town, and Leah, yes, thank you too for making time so late at night to be here, and thank you all for coming. I am going to very briefly introduce the book so that everyone has a frame of reference for our discussion, and we will, of course, be getting into details of the story itself, the structure, the language, really everything that you might be interested in. This is the story of a love affair between the celebrated classical concert pianist Vladimir Horowitz with his first student ever, a male student named Nico Kaufmann, in the late 1930s in Switzerland. And the story is told by means of a frame narrative set in 1986, when Nico Kaufmann, who did in fact play piano for his whole life, but never reached anything comparable to the heights that Horowitz reached, was working as a bar pianist in Zurich, and is approached by a man named Reto Donati, who has been sort of moved to seek out a pianist who will play the piece Träumerei, or Dreaming, by Schumann. This piece essentially saved this man Donati from what was a planned suicide attempt. And it goes from there, where Kaufmann reminisces to Donati about his life as a young pianist, as this young pupil of Horowitz's in Zurich in the 1930s, as Europe is approaching World War II, Horowitz being married to Wanda Toscanini, the daughter of conductor Arturo Toscanini, and all sorts of drama that surrounds that. Now, Horowitz died in 1989. He and Wanda Toscanini were living in New York for the latter part of both of their lives. And the final concerts Horowitz gave in the US were in the fall of 1986 at Lincoln Center, and to celebrate the reopening of a refurbished Carnegie Hall. There was, however, also a legendary performance that he gave in Berlin in May of 1986. And Leah, I understand that you attended this concert, and I wonder if you could tell us a bit about it.
Thanks, Liz. What's gorgeous. I was in this concert and it changed me to a hunter. I think most writers are those hunters and gatherers. And I heard of this concert in May 1986 in Berlin, and it seemed possible to get tickets only by best relationships or by a lot of money, and I didn't have either. But I had done a well-paid model job, a learning job, student job, and I decided quickly to cancel my trip to Italy. And
Can't hear her or understand.
yeah, and I was still young, and I invested in the trip to Berlin and in the ticket. And I had luck because I needed only one ticket, a single ticket, and I think it had good points to have a non-musical boyfriend. And I saw Horowitz at close range, and I experienced something I had not expected. I saw Horowitz coming on the stage like a shy penguin, awkward, tabby. He was 83 years old, and a penguin with a gloriole. But when he played, he forgot everything. But the applause was frenetic, and but there remained a sadness in his grin. He grinned like a child on a birthday, but there remained a sadness, and I couldn't understand the sadness. And when he played as an encore, the Traumerei by Schumann from the Scenes from a Childhood, he seemed to cry. I sat at close range, and he had wet eyes, and he blew himself violently afterwards. And after that, I asked myself, why did Horowitz cry? And I changed to a hunter because there were no answers in the biographies I knew.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you depict this scene beautifully in the book, because the concert was also shown live. That's correct. It was broadcast live around the world, and we see our protagonist, or our protagonists, Nico Kaufmann and Reto Donati, seeing this concert, seeing Horowitz. Like you, they may not have lucked into good seats near the front of the hall, but they saw him on camera, and they saw this encore, and they saw him cry. And I imagine they had some of the same questions, or perhaps Nico knew some of the answers to why Horowitz may have been crying in a moment like that. Now, Horowitz, of course, is a name known around the world, both in his own right as one of the best pianists of all time, and of course because of his association with the Toscanini family. but who is Nico Kaufmann? This is not a name that is perhaps familiar to most people. So how did you discover Nico Kaufmann?
It was exactly 10 years later, a little bit more, in 1996, when I visited my parents living on the Lake of Constance. And in the train, I read the NZZ, that's the most important newspaper in Switzerland, and one of the most important in German language. And there was a tiny text by Tor, a tiny text about the so-called Nico Kaufmann, and recently deceased, and that he made a donation to the Swiss archive, so-called Zentralbibliothek Zurich, Central Library of Zurich. And there was written, the donation means about 50 letters on some other pieces of memory of Nico Kaufmann, some of his works as a composer, a short biography of Nico Kaufmann, not written by himself, but by a person, I don't know the name, and some notes about his teacher, Vladimir Horowitz.
Mm-hmm.
And at that moment, I changed gatherer and wanted to know where are the letters. And then I forgot it because there was no chance to get in. And in 2011, I bought a brand new CD with scenes from a childhood by Horowitz. And I thought of the clipping and found it in the biography of Plaskin, the fundamental biography. And then I began to look for the letters in Zurich. And it was an incredible, a breathtaking adventure to read them. It was a breathtaking adventure. But I hadn't expected what I found, because this correspondence is only the half, only the letters from Horowitz to Nico, because Nico had promised to destroy the letters, and Horowitz had destroyed the letters, but Horowitz did it, and Nico didn't, to our happiness. And in the letters, there's a conflict revealed, of which nothing has been known previously, nothing, really nothing. And also that Horowitz had a pupil in Europe is not mentioned in Laskin or other biographies.
Mm-hmm.
He denied this first pupil, and he knew why.
Mm-hmm. And when you say these letters contained conflict, do you mean the psychological conflict that Horowitz was experiencing? Was it conflict between the two men, between Horowitz and Kaufmann? How would you describe that conflict, and how did you approach that?
Conflicts in any case, because there are conflicts between the teacher and the student, but they are only in the beginning of the letters. That was a kind of a security lock, because they thought about anybody could read the letters, and if there was in the beginning a boring thing like explaining how to do a piece of Beethoven, a curious person says, "Oh no, that's bullshit. I'm not interested in."
Mm-hmm.
And it was a kind of security law. And the conflicts between teacher and student were always the same. Nico thought in the beginning that being the pupil would be only a decoration. But Horowitz was too serious as a pianist, as a teacher, as a person, as a personality to play only to be a teacher. And he was really passionate. And pull yourself together. No pain, no gain. Don't play too fast. Don't play too fast. Don't play too fast. Always. And but the main conflict is between the two lovers, because Nico was a prolific young man, 12 years younger than Howard, and a young man of striking sex appeal. He was conscious to be that. And later we'll see some photographs.
Yeah.
And he loved to incite Howard with heterosexual affairs, and he knew exactly how you could incite him. And Howard was so jealous, and the letters are full of jealousy and longing, of anguish and of desire, of a lot of jealousy,
Yeah.
Also inner power struggle. And there's another conflict, because Howard knew exactly that it was a great danger, that his father-in-law, who despised all homosexuals, would be informed about his affair.
Yes. Toscanini is an ever-present threat throughout this story. But I wonder, when you're starting with such rich first-hand materials, I mean, these are the letters that Horowitz wrote, and you said there were about 30 of them. Is that right?
50. About 50. There are postcards and letters mixed, but altogether about 50.
Yeah. So you have this incredible trove of primary sources. And you, as a trained musicologist, as Jeff said in the introduction, you have written plenty of nonfiction pieces about famous composers and musicians and philosophers over time. What made you decide, even with all of these resources, all of these materials, to write a fictionalized version, to write a novel, rather than to write a nonfiction account of this love affair?
I think the decision is made up quickly, because it depends on me, it depends on the stuff, on the material, on the story I found. And it's a story of such emotional power, and that emotional power is a how would I call it? A challenge forms I can use as a non-fiction writer, like inner dialogues, inner monologues, and dialogues, and you can use these forms as a non-fiction writer.
Yeah.
And otherwise, I wanted to transmit this emotional quality of the story. The decision was really clear that I have to write a novel and not write a non-fiction book.
Yeah, of course. I mean, conflict lends itself very well to fiction and to storytelling. And so I think now perhaps we should hear a bit of the book. And so I'll read a short passage from my translation to set it up briefly for the audience. As is the case throughout the novel, this is Nico Kaufmann in 1986 speaking with this man, Reto Donati, who has just entered his life and with whom Kaufmann is sort of wandering down the path of reminiscence. To try to avoid any confusion, Reto at this point is using a fake name, Robert. And I think that may be all that may be all you need to know. And another character in this scene is Nathan Milstein, the virtuoso violinist from the 20th century. I met him over tea. Nathan Milstein, same height as Horowitz, same age, nearly as famous, and also Russian, but at the same time, his exact opposite. Milstein was amiable. He loved women and champagne, ideally Magnum in either case. He invited us out to a nightclub, a shadowy second-floor establishment on the banks of the Reuss, the kind of place with voluptuous ladies in fishnet stockings and false eyelashes, tabletop phones, decorative folding screens. Milstein was thinking less of himself than of Volodya. You'd be hard-pressed to find a better cover for male lovers. My champagne buzz that night ended with me draped over a railing, vomiting into the Reuss. Horowitz just watched helplessly while Milstein held on to me. No idea how they kept the stairs from creaking as they hauled me up to my room. I had closed my eyes, my bed and the whole building a swaying ship. Then Horowitz kissed me. Robert leaned forward again. On the forehead, Kaufmann added. You still sound disappointed, Robert commented. Kaufmann's narrow eyes glittered. I was a junkie back then, but it wasn't dope or cigarettes or alcohol I was addicted to. Adoration was my drug. The more famous my admirer, the more powerful the high. Horowitz, well, you know. I didn't even realize what was going on with him. It was Milstein who tipped me off. He was telling us about Paris, and it was downright electrifying the way he went on. But Horowitz didn't react, didn't laugh, didn't chime in, didn't ask any questions. His expression was icy in the early summer heat. Have you heard my latest record? He asked Milstein. Some of it is good, but much of it is bad, very bad. What are they saying about me in Paris, about why I'm not performing? Is it true Toscanini's been saying I can throw in the towel if my next concert isn't a sensation? Milstein simply asked in response, are you practicing again, Volodya? I'm trying, Horowitz said, studying his hands as though they were alien to him. I caught Milstein as he was headed for the toilet. But why isn't he practicing? Why isn't he playing if it depresses him not to? Turn things around and it all adds up. 1934 is when it started for Volodya. For a while, he could drown it out on the piano, on those murderous tours. All he talks about is his demons. He hoped they'd suffocate if he just kept moving. But why, I asked, did it start in 1934? When one aligns the dates, it's often possible to discover connections, he said. When Milstein left 3 days later, he took my hands in his, which to me looked like we were praying together. Be good to him, young man. No one before Volodya has ever played the way he does, and no one after him ever will. That tone. Sometimes I think tone means more to him than the music. He lived for that and that alone, and for the money. I aimed to please, and that included Milstein, so I begged Horowitz to let me listen to him practice. I actually begged him on my knees, which he liked. He hesitated, didn't respond. Late that night at the bar, he wanted to know where I had heard him play, and what. At the Tonhalle in Zurich, you played the Tchaikovsky concerto. And I was in raptures. It was awful, he interrupted me, because it wasn't Tchaikovsky I was playing, it was Horowitz. All sorts of things that weren't even on the page. Still, it worked. The more risks I took, the louder the applause when I survived them. The crowd was looking to me for thrills, and that's what they got, but it was bad. I tried to patch things up with him. I tried to patch things up the next day at lunch. I was a born imposter. It wasn't his virtuosity that had done it for me that night at the Tonhalle, I said. It was his tone. Never before had I heard someone play like that. That tone, that unbelievable tone. He didn't respond. Then, finally, he said, maybe in 3 days. Following our midday nap 3 days later, he really did sit down at the Steinway, upright and earnest. Schumann's Fantasie in C major, hellish piece. Movement was confined to his elbows down while his back and shoulders remained still. Hands flat, long fingers stretched out straight, fingertips practically curved upward. His pinkies curled, then sprang into action. Any piano teacher worth his salt would throw a fit at the sight of such hand positioning. Horowitz crashed down the octave runs as though taking a pleasant stroll. His staccato notes flickered off the page, and he sailed through the rapid changes in tempo and dynamics. But he kept stopping. He might play the same passage 3, 4, even 10 times, changing the slightest nuance in pedaling or phrasing. Not once in my life had I practiced that way. But that's not all. When Horowitz struck a key and immediately let off, the resonance unfolded in the space like magic, and the space unfolded into outer space. I was witnessing firsthand the birth of music through tone. I now understood what Milstein meant. Our next nap was anything but sleepy. When he emerged from the bath, towel around his waist, Horowitz asked if I had a driver's license. He didn't have one, just a chauffeur who'd stayed behind in Paris with the rolls. The hotel rented a car, and Kaufman checked the time. We should see about rooms. This passage has a lot going on. I'm going to take a sip of water. This passage has a lot of things going on in terms of language, of course, in terms of content, with Horowitz as a player, and the many issues he had with stage fright and extended hiatuses where he simply couldn't bring himself to play. Excuse me. For me as the translator, this section, in particular the section about his playing, was one of the hardest sections in the entire book. And I really, when I was writing the first draft, I thought, my God, I'm never, ever going to figure out how to make this work. And one of the things that really struck me in many of the descriptions of Horowitz in particular playing is the physicality of the act of piano playing, of course, but also the writing. And in a passage like this, I felt the need to at once step away from the text, and because the image was so clear in my mind, the image that you were describing in the original German was so clear in my mind that I felt I had to step away from the text and ask myself, okay, if I were writing this for the first time, if I were creating this image, how would I describe it? But at the same time, I felt I sort of had to climb into the language and climb into that moment. And in fact, again, because of the physicality of this description, I found myself looking at my hand and curling my pinky in and thinking, okay, what verb is that when my pinky shoots out? And it was sort of funny. I was at a bagel shop in Burlington doing this. Who knows what the people around might have thought. And then of course too, and this is kind of a nice moment also to mention. Of course too, I spent a lot of time while translating this book listening to the many recordings. It's sort of a compendium of these incredible pieces throughout. And in fact, New Vessel Press has put together a Spotify playlist of the recordings of the Horowitz pieces, or the Horowitz recordings of the pieces that are mentioned here. And one last thing that I'll say about translating these passages is just to compare a little bit the way German syntax, German sentence structure works compared to the way we tend to punctuate things in English. In German, really, I mean, you can have these sentences that just span an entire page where independent clauses are connected only by a comma, which in English is just a pause, but which in German can count essentially as a full stop, But of course, there is also the suggestion that the line keeps moving. And here too, I really thought about musical phrasing. And I suppose my own training in classical violin, I mean, I'm nothing, nowhere near the level we're talking about here, but understanding the importance of breath in music, the phrasing, the importance of rests and of full stops and quiet, something that Horowitz also reminds his student, Nico Kaufmann, because most students want to rush, skip through rests, crash through fortissimo the entire time. And those changes in dynamic and phrasing and flow are critical. And I felt the musicality in this text was also created by varying sentence length and taking a moment sometimes to pause in the English where in the German it may not have existed. But I would also really like to hear you say a little bit, Leah, about writing about music. Later in the book, you in fact have your character Nico Kaufmann comment, describing music is a fool's errand. Music begins where language fails. How can one expect to transform it into words after the fact? And so I wonder how you think about writing about music, how you approach writing about music and making music.
Well, I think it's a really difficult thing. The expertise is very important, and the details have to be exactly right. But more important for me is that you have a suggestiveness, because you can reach the reader only with the suggestiveness of the words, and therefore I think it needs musicality by the writer to write about music.
Mm-hmm.
I just read a novel from a very famous German writer about the composer, and I don't want to speak about the mistakes he made. That's not important, but your feeling he is largely clueless, and he therefore is not able to develop musicality in the text. You need rhythm, you need sound, you need feelings for the intermissions, and for the importance of intermissions in your text. And I never studied piano. I studied singing, I studied professional, and I studied viola and violin. But it's enough for understanding how music works. And you don't have to try copying your hero. Mm-hmm. Horowitz was born as a teacher because he was eccentric, very eccentric, and he was a magician, and I think the mixture of skill and enchanting power and of eccentricity and of a certain talent to make the audience spellbound. Mm-hmm. That's not a mixture you can imitate. And he get upset. He get always upset if anybody wanted to copy, to imitate his style. Mm-hmm. And therefore he was not born as a teacher. He couldn't explain what he did, and he wanted not to explain what he did.
Yeah.
He polarized also the critics and also the audience. A lot of people worshipped him, and others said he's the master of exaggeration, the master of distortion, and therefore he couldn't teach. And we'll see some photographs later, and you can see that Nico, one thing was imitating how he had the hands on the piano.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great segue. Then let's see some pictures. I am going to share my screen, and Leah, if you could, excuse me, that is my computer. I turned off my phone, but these notifications, I don't know why they're still coming in. But I will share my screen, and Leah, if you could just say a couple words about each photo, so we know. I'm going to cue these up here, share this, and go full screen. Is that visible?
It's visible for me, yeah.
All right.
This photograph you have chosen for the cover. It's a wonderful cover. I'm so glad about it. It's really great. Thanks to the designers. It's wonderful. And it's photograph typically for Horowitz because he loved such a melancholic pose. And friends from Russia like Milstein, they knew that they were privy with his homosexual affairs in Russia. And in Petersburg, there was a very free scene this time when he was young. And Horowitz was wondering, like later, the gay people in Berlin in the 20s over the boulevards, and he wore furs, big furs. He wore makeup and big rings and other jewels. And he didn't leave Russia out of political reasons. He left Russia only because he wanted to make a career in Europe. That was his aim. And I think it's a typical photograph of him.
Yeah. Then moving on.
That's Nico Kaufmann. And it's one of his greatest, I think, the only great effort as a pianist in his life. He won in 1945 a very highly esteemed competition at the Concours de Genève. And the first one who won it was Arturo Benedetti Michelangeli. And the year after Nico, it was Friedrich Gulda, one of my favorite Mozart pianists. And you see, Nico has the hands like Horowitz. There are people who say he had learned from his teacher in Russia, Felix Blumenfeld, but that's wrong. Horowitz said it. Blumenfeld was a wonderful teacher for him because he said, it doesn't matter how you are playing. You must be a honest technician, but how does it work? Don't interest me. You can play with the nose if it's good. If it sounds good, play with the nose. And this kind of freedom was wonderful for Horowitz because he was eccentric and also he was an eccentric technician. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And to win this prize in 1945 was a triumph for Nico, and he traveled to the United States and he wanted to renew the contact, to renew the affair with Horowitz, or even to see him, and Horowitz denied, and that was a terrible disappointment for him.
Yeah, yeah.
And after this time, he gave up.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a photograph for, I think, also for children, but there are a lot of photographs in Switzerland, but the copyright belongs to the social archive, so-called social archive, and I think they don't allow to publish these photographs. I think it does hundreds of photographs from Nico and his family, and a very rare photograph of Horowitz pale, very strained. It's a portrait of him as a king of nervosity and smoking on a little balcony of a grand hotel. And there are a lot of photographs of Nico posing. He enjoyed posing like a pinup and wearing only a little bit more than nothing. And he was really an adoration addict. And that was a problem for Horowitz.
Yes.
Prudish in this sense, very prudish and puritanic. And he knew that he incited Horowitz with his pictures, and he sent these pictures to Horowitz. This is the one of only two photographs I know of them, both of them. And you see the contrast between the faces, the facial features, the nervous and strict face of Volodya, of Horowitz, and the boyish and sweet facial features of Nico. And I think this contrast was one of the attraction points of the secret of the sexual attraction.
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful. Thank you.
Horowitz wasn't muscular. On this gorgeous photograph on the balcony, that's really, Horowitz is really nearly naked and wearing a skirt and nothing, only underwear. And you see his not muscular body. There are a lot of pianists with muscles, but he was not muscular. And he made all this perfect technique. And you see also that he was a well-groomed couch potato. And Nika was a trained and proper fit young man.
Mm-hmm. I guess we finished now. Thank you for introducing those photos. I would like to pivot. Just looking at the time, because I do feel it's important that we speak some about Horowitz's relationship with his wife Wanda, and if the audience will permit, this is a little bit of a multimedia moment in the presentation. We do have a short video to show where we will see Wanda Toscanini, Arturo Toscanini, Horowitz in action, and afterward, Leah, we will hear some of your expertise and some of your opinions about their relationship. So I will now share my screen again.
My father came back to Milano and told us about the program, and they told me there is a pianist, Vladimir Horowitz. Oh, I said, so he said, what's the matter with you? Because I already heard him, you see, this was 1933. I heard him in 32 and 33. So that's when father met Volodya. My father always had his solids go to his house, so he told the manager that Mr. Hall should be at the Hotel Astor at certain hours. So I was so nervous that father wouldn't like him that I went out. And Mr. Horowitz had been scared to death by everybody, saying like father would be an ogre, said be punctual, otherwise he will kick you out. So he said to me that 10 minutes before 3 or 4, he was going around the Hotel Astor to be ready.
And when we rehearsed a little bit, and he was very pleased. And that I met him and played. And after that, I met my wife, Then I played Brahms with him and many other things. Then after that, he was my father-in-law, you know. I didn't know even that he has children and a musical background. She came to the rehearsal. She fell in love with me.
We were just married, early 1934, and it was published in Vanity Fair. In this picture, it's me with my father. You can see that the profiles are very similar. And that's where the similarity ends. He got the talent, and I only got the profile. This is a picture of my daughter Sonia with my father. You see the smile on his face looking at her. She was the one he liked mostly. And I think he said once to my mother, very gently, that he never loved his children as much as Sonia, which was one side flattering, one side not so flattering. I'm exactly like my mother in temperament, a very patient woman. You can never express your own personality. You have to subdue your personality to them. But that's what I chose. No, nobody forced me. Well, first of all, nobody forced me to be the daughter of my father. Just happened. And nobody forced me to get married to a famous artist. Sonia was our only child. She was the granddaughter and the daughter of two personalities. It was even more difficult for her. That is the self-portrait she painted before she died. I saw him sitting in the chair with still eyes, and boom, and then on the floor, flat on the floor. So I went there right away and said, Miss Nile, Mr. Howard is dead. But the thing that is interesting, that I didn't get rid of that chair. You know, somebody would think, get rid of the chair. No, I sit every day in that chair. What kept us together was the music and his pianist concerts. Well, I liked him also like a person, as a person. But I mean, the bound, say, was the music.
She seemed almost to forget to say that she liked her husband as a person too. So Leah, how do you see the relationship between Horowitz and his wife, Wanda Toscanini?
Oh, it was far away from this, what you have seen here. They never felt in love together. The marriage was a big deal. And you know, the quintessence of gentleman prefer blonde of power talks, money on love, that's the business. And in this case, the business was fame, Howard's fame, on relationships of his father-in-law. And he was the mightiest man in year 16 of his time. And people said he was conducting with a conducting baton in one hand, in the other pistol. And Howard feared his father-in-law, really. And he knew that he despised despised all homosexuals, and the marriage was really a deal. And Wanda hated it to be only the daughter of her father, and she saw a big chance by this marriage to show her father, I am able to conquer a genius, not only to be his daughter. And 3 years after the marriage, the drama had just involved, and one of the results was that Sonia, the daughter, committed suicide. And 3 years after the marriage, the first result was that Howard was incapable to perform. He was unable to go on stage, and circulated informations he would end his career because he was very ill, and it was a riddle for the people. It was also a riddle for the biographers why he could come back in 38 to the stage, and why he could resume his recitals in Paris. What happened in between the beginning of his prizes in 37 and his comeback in second half of 38? What happened? And the letters solved the riddle because it was a sexual affair. Mm-hmm. And Howard knew he needed something to help against the suppressed inclinations, suppressed sexual identity. And if you ask a psychiatrist, every psychiatrist would inform you that suppressed sexual identity leads always to deep depression. And that was a surprise. Howard was had to pay. It was a high price, a very high price. And he was in anguish until his death, to be I think, to put in the prana. It was a big stress for him, and therefore he underwent a conversion therapy. Mm-hmm. And it was the horror for me when I followed the debate in last year, as Pete Buttigieg attacked Pence because Pence once backed conversion therapy, and he was anxious for a fund. He was anxious to collect money in the interest of so-called healing of homosexuals, mm-hmm. to convert them from homosexuals to heterosexuals. And Howard underwent this therapy, and he knew it's a torture. It's really a torture. In Germany, it's forbidden, like last year. It's really forbidden. And the only way he could solve his crisis, he could escape this crisis, was to live his real sexual desire. And Nico was the best chance, but he lived. It was a risk. at this moment he was at risk, and he knew it. And he was at risk because he knew that would be the end of his contact with Toscanini, that would be the end of his marriage. And it was a big stress, and he was always strained thinking about. But Wanda, I think, allowed him to see, to know exactly what there was, and he didn't want to know it exactly. She allowed the contact with Nico because she could only use Howard as a husband when he was famous. A non-famous husband had a worth of nothing. Mm-hmm. And therefore she was interested to enable her husband to come back to stage, to resume the recitals, and Nico was good for this effect. Therefore she tolerated the relationship.
Yeah, and this is of course from the passage I read, when Milstein mentions 1934. Yeah. 1934 is when Horowitz and Wanda were married, correct? Yeah. And from that point onward until
exactly. That's the point. That's the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you never had depressions before. They began really by suppressing the identity, and it was his duty to produce a daughter, a child. He was duty as a son-in-law from an Italian father-in-law. And I think it was a drama, and the suicide of Sonia was a result of the coldness in the family. It was really the same coldness as in the Toscanini family. Also, Wanda was a victim. He was a victim of her father. He was a victim of a father who didn't praise, who didn't support his children. They aren't allowed to make music. They aren't allowed to do nothing. They were really slaves of her father. And also Wanda was a victim. She wasn't free. And she was numb for the inner conflicts of her husband, but he was also numb for her inner conflicts. And therefore the marriage was really a cage, a terrible cage for both of them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm looking at the time and I see that we're already a couple of minutes past 7. So I think perhaps we should open up the Zoom room to questions from our audience, if there are any out there.
Yes, if you can use the hand wave function, and I'll also get to gallery at some point, and I can see, and I'm glad to know, learn something new. I lost power 3 times. I was in the dark, and so I switched from, so the Wi-Fi is still not functioning, so I'm on my iPhone. And I saw that it continued, thankfully. And there were, so the only disruption was on Instagram, because of course it stopped. But in any event, I will, let me see. Again, I'm not used to doing it on my phone. So I'm just going to scroll through. And if you have a question, go ahead. I mean, this is unfortunately very cumbersome now because I'm on my little iPhone. So why don't I say, if we can do this like we're all together, you know, if you're looking at each other on gallery view, if someone has a question they want to pose to either Leah or Liz or both, go ahead and ask that question.
How do you do that? Is this it? I mean,
Yes, go ahead and
technical mumbo jumbo to go through?
Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Really for both of you, Leah, whom I know as Gesine, is one of my oldest friends. And it's great to see you. This is the first time we're conversing in English. And the first time I'm hearing you being called Leah. And the first time you're seeing kind of our house in Princeton. I've also known Liz for many years, and this is a very exciting thing for me to see the two of you working together on this project, and congratulations to Michael as well for initiating it. I wanted to ask both of you about your process of working together as author and translator. How early in the project did you discuss the project, and how did that play out?
Yeah, we didn't have much contact, as I recall, really until the translation was in kind of the final stages. Leah, what was the first form of the translation you read? Was it the advanced reader copy, or did we? No, I think when I was working with Michael and Henry Giffords at New Vessel Press on our edits, there were some queries that I had for Leah, and I believe at that time they were still being communicated through Michael. I don't know that we had contact until pretty late in the game.
Yeah, it was nearly finished when I saw it first time. Yeah, and I was immediately convinced of the high quality of the translation.
I'm very glad to hear that.
Then I asked, are there musicians in your family? She said, yes. That was my first question. Your brother and father, and I think you're musicians, right?
Yes, that's right. My parents are both classical singers. My father plays organ and piano. My sister plays piano. I play violin. So that really did help. It definitely helped along the way.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I guess I'll ask you, how long did it take from beginning to end, the total process of the two of you working together and then working with the publisher and the editor to complete your final draft?
Yeah. Michael first approached me in, I believe it was October of last year, saying he had acquired the rights for this book and would I be interested? And the decision was really easy to make, that I was in fact very interested to translate this wonderful novel. And I then got the hard copy of the book, which is also a beautiful, the English version is beautiful. The German version is also very beautiful, published by Kampa in Switzerland. And read the book and then started the translation. And I will say that this book, it was tricky in so many ways, and in the ways that I think bring us translators back and back to this work. But this book in particular, I think when I first read it even, and when I started thinking about translating it, it took me quite a lot of time to find the proper register, and especially with Nico, to find the right voice for him. Because I think perhaps because it takes place in the 1930s and the world of classical music, I think I had some of my own assumptions or expectations that the storytelling, that the story itself would be much more serious, that the storytelling would be very earnest. And with Nico in particular, I thought that he would just have a more sort of subdued tone in talking about this world famous pianist and Toscanini and this world. And Nico is really cheeky. And and really a really fun character to tap into. But it took me a while to realize that. And I think as soon as I did, I started having a lot more fun because I took more risks in the translation. And I'll say too that having started work on the book in November, let's say, I went in February to a translation retreat in Germany. And it was that focused time that allowed me to really immerse myself in the text and really feel that I was starting to gain traction with it. I felt that I needed to be completely cut off from everything else and have the time to get to know the characters, get to know the story, and then of course spend time with my own writing as I translated it. So the month that I was in Germany, before I then had to hurry back under cover of darkness because the State Department called all American citizens back, I was supposed to be there for 2 months. I was there for 1, but that 1 month was really critical for the production of the text. And then I turned in my manuscript in early April, and then it went into the editorial process, and that extended through much of the summer. And Leah, you were involved at that point then too.
When I saw the translation first time, it was a big surprise for me how exactly you define the different tones for the characters. That was a big surprise. It's gorgeous, really wonderful, because there are some passages I knew they would be very difficult. And when I got the translation, I looked first for these passages, the vulnerable points. It was a big surprise for me how you did it. But it was a great musicality. I can't say it otherwise. I would be correct something about what I corrected something about, but it was really exactly what I wished, what I had in my mind.
That's wonderful for me to hear. We can talk outside of Zoom about what those passages were. I'd be very curious to hear.
Liz did a fantastic job, and the translation was in excellent condition. We did some editing and some work afterwards, but she is really a superb translator, and really, I think her English rendering of this book is we're very, very proud of it, and very lucky to have had her working on this project.
Thanks, Michael.
On a funny episode, I had a phone with my friend Shelley, you saw, and she said, "Oh, Liz Lauffer, I know her very well, but she's a great talent. She's really a great talent. You're lucky."
This is the second book that we've done with Liz, and we hope to do many more. She's really a wonderful translator, and we're very, very fortunate to have this book as well. So it's a really wonderful book. So.
Yeah.
Incredibly rich, a lot to talk about as we've heard throughout the evening. So.
We had a question from submitted to Gmail, which is, I guess, probably to you, Michael, or you probably would be the one who would know. And the question is, are there any plans for this to become an audiobook as well?
So far, no. We have sent it to many audiobook companies, and we certainly hope, I think it would make an excellent audiobook. So we hope that it will be. It could also have musical passages in the audio, depending on, that's a copyright question, but we have created the Spotify list, which is on our website. We have a Spotify playlist and also a selection of YouTube videos of Horowitz performing many of the pieces that are in the book, or sometimes with other performers of some of the pieces that are mentioned. But it's as you're reading it, you're constantly wanting to listen to the music. So it would make a great audiobook just from the nature of the story, the dialogue, and the musical element.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we'll let you know if it becomes an audiobook, then it'll be available on our website through the ABA and Libro FM. And so we'll just keep watch on that. And in fact, if you end up doing it, Michael, and I see it, then I'll send out on our newsletter a notice with a link if that does become available. And the Spotify playlist, which is fantastic. Congratulations on your selections that you put together for that. You can also find that on the event page on our website for this event, and also on our Facebook store page if you'd like to listen to that. And then this video will be available probably sometime tomorrow on our Facebook store page, and then also on Instagram IGTV. And I look forward to getting that on there, especially since we had to unfortunately abruptly stop the Instagram because of the power outages here. But anyway, I want to thank everyone for participating tonight. And I was getting pretty nervous with these very, very strong winds in the storm coming, and hoping that at the very least AT&T cell service would be there, and in fact it is. And I guess now, like I said, apparently once we start the event, it continues to go and record until the host, which is me, ends it. So even though I lost power and was out completely, it continued, thankfully. So we'll have this edited and available. The books, again, the book is available all the time, but if you want it signed, make your purchase by Sunday. There's a place where you can indicate what kind of inscription you want, and if it's a gift for someone else, you can tell us that as well. You also have shipping options there if you're not in town and are not able to pick it up. And so I want to thank you. I want to mention, Michael, while you're here and the audience is here, there's so many of the books that New Vessel Press publishes that I really love, and one of the other ones, in addition to the Piano Student, that I think is phenomenal and that people really have been excited about when I brought it to their attention here, is The Villa Delirium. This beautiful book, phenomenal story, very exciting. One of those, it's really hard to put down in terms of the family and their quest, this palace they construct, and the attempt to be immersed in culture of the Greek world is phenomenal. It made me think a little bit of, in terms of these stories of the family, a little bit of Gerald Durrell, and the Durrells in Corfu, and that part. It's a fantastic book. So if you haven't picked it up, I highly encourage you to pick that up, as well as The Piano Student, and it's available on our website and is one of our recommended books. And of course, we have it in store. So again, thank you so much to you, Michael, for bringing such phenomenal books here, to Leah and to Liz for being with us, and very extra big thank you to Leah for staying up so much later than the rest of us over in.
Yeah, thanks a lot to Jeff and to my wonderful translator, and to the visit of my friend Shirley, herself a wonderful translator. And it was nice to meet you here, and I hope we meet again.
Well, next year we have to get back to Munich. This thing has to end.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Leah and Liz. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Everyone. Good night.